The BraveSpace podcast is devoted to the meeting of body and spirit. In a culture of shared respect and love for the life force that moves through us, we move, feel, dance, breathe, touch, and sing in somatic ecstatic prayer. BraveSpace is the place of belonging, safe enough to take the risk of being vulnerable. Welcome to the BraveSpace podcast. I am your host, Matthew Nelson, and today I have the pleasure of bringing you Burcs. Burcs is master of the Light Language Project. He is a DJ and music producer and ceremonialist. I'm excited to have him here because I'm so interested in this phenomenon of ecstatic dance. And he's one of the people I see bringing it at a really high level in terms of how he creates spaces. And he'll speak in some depth today about that. He's also a very spiritual person. You'll get a lot of his story here. And then there's a second episode. I want to give that to you as its own piece that's not as directly related to the music or the space holding that he does, but to really where he's gone in the depths of himself. So for those of you really drawn into that, and we go pretty far out there together, it was really a joy. Check that out. It's a second episode that's coming out with this one. I was lucky enough to have Burcs in Boise for a dance that I was holding at the time, and you came in and just opened it up.
Yeah.
It was really beautiful to see the way the community responded, and the thing that particularly took me and impressed me is the way that you weren't just playing the tracks that you create. Yeah. You were live creating, adjusting based on what was happening in the room. Mm-hmm. And my dad's a composer.
Oh, cool.
Electroacoustic, contemporary classical.
Right.
So he's been playing with that equipment since the 70s, through the whole evolution. He used to have tape decks on stage to create delay. He'd have the tape running from one deck to another.
Really?
Working with live musicians. And so I've been exposed to that kind of thing all my life.
Yeah.
And to see you come in and working with it the way you do to create ceremony. Mm-hmm. I know what I'm looking at. I know what's going into that.
Some idea, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely not as in depth as like running tape machines and stuff on stage. Like thankfully it's all in there, but
yeah,
that's still,
the depth of the understanding and the conception and what you're playing with.
Yeah.
That has to be there. So yeah, I see you.
And reading the room and following the energies and thinking on the fly. I think that's one of your tenets of your BraveSpace, right? Is the improvisation. Yeah. I thought maybe I'd frame our discussion today with the last principle, which is interbeing. And what interbeing really means for me is that we are both individual and collective at the same time. Right.
So like we are trees within a forest, but a forest is its own whole life form.
Yeah.
And there's no tree that's really doing its thing on its own.
Right.
The forest has a consciousness to it.
Yeah. One of the ways I communicate that to people, I think it was Wayne Dyer or Neil Donald Walsh, it's one of them, but there's two different ways I explain it. And one is like if you take a mirror and it's a whole mirror and you shatter it, it's still the same mirror, but each piece now has an individual reflection. Right. So depending on where you put the piece around the room or on the floor or wherever, it reflects a different perspective, but it's still part of the original mirror. And then the other one is the ocean, right? The ocean is this big body of water made up of all these molecules and different things and minerals. And if you take a cup of ocean water, and this is a Wayne Dyer concept, he used to say, if you scoop a cup of ocean water out and you walk it 800 miles away from the ocean, is it any less the ocean? No, it's just the ocean in a cup of water.
Yes.
And so that's the way I look at our individuality compared to the unity, right?
Yeah.
You can separate it. It's a different perspective, a different place, but it's still the same core concept.
Yes.
Spread out.
And there's nowhere that manifests that way to me quite like the dance floor.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
for sure.
As humans go.
Uh-huh.
It's like when we get out of our mind and our cognitive speaking, that aspect, when we're just dropped into our bodies together to watch things happen on the dance floor, feels to me like one of the ways we best embody this.
Absolutely. I think that's why it's probably my favorite ceremonial space. You know, I'm in all these different ceremonial spaces, whether it's plant medicine or sound journeys or dance or whatever. There's all these different things that I facilitate and do, but the dance floor is my favorite place to be the maestro, to be the guy that gets to work with that energy, right? Because it's one thing to be on the dance floor and be in it and interacting, and you feel that synergy and you feel that unity and your individuality and how they interplay. But to be able to direct that energy, like like the director of the orchestra up there, it's such an amazing feeling of power and responsibility and unity with everyone, right? Because you get to hold those intentions for everyone and help them feel that.
Tell me, how do you work with your intention and the communal intention?
So I think the key piece that I mentioned there, and this is why I mentioned intention, right, is I said it feels very powerful, because it is. To be in any facilitator role, in any container, there's a certain level of power that we wield.
Yes.
Right? And the difference between magic and shamanism and healing and all this stuff, like the light side of things and the dark side of things, sorcery, is the intention, right? If we step into it as a facilitator and we're coming from a place of our own shadow or our own intentions that are out of alignment, or feeding ourselves our personal power, right? Our personal, growing our energy and our ability and our money and our power and those lower chakra things, right? There's nothing wrong with those things, but when we step into these places doing that, we're doing sorcery. We're manipulating others. We're harvesting their energy and we're taking it for ourselves. But when we step in with intention to give back in reciprocity and in giving to the community, right? They're giving to us. They're giving us their attention and their power and their awareness and their energy. And for us to take that and hold it and not give it back is sorcery, right?
Yes.
And that's how a lot of I've spoke about this on other podcasts, that's how a lot of the entertainment industry is structured, right? Everybody's praying to the DJ god or the performer, just feeding them. And you see their fame grow, you see their money grow, you see their notoriety, their ability, everything grow. But what are they giving back, right? And so that's what's important to me, is to step into those spaces as a facilitator to facilitate the inherent harmony and grand perfection of all of existence, right? And feed that, yes, through me. That does all those things for me. It builds my notoriety, my recognition, my wealth, whatever. But I give it back in the same way, and that's the whole point. And that's why we have the central altar and the shamanic technology that we can talk about later in the container that I'm in, is to cycle that energy through the space. Because in that way, we're all kind of putting it into a communal pot. We can all draw from that mana and that energy that's available. And we're spreading it around and we're growing it exponentially, right? 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, it equals 3.
Yeah.
In those spaces.
Yeah. There's a wholeness. There's the way 1 and 1 equal 3 for me is there's you, there's me, and there's us.
Exactly. It's like an over unity principle, where like you put in a part, I put in a part, but we somehow get 3 parts back.
Yeah.
And then there's abundance.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So the intention, stepping into those spaces, is to do that. To, yes, take care of ourselves and give back at the same time and grow something that is exponentially larger or more beneficial than the way we stepped into that container.
Yeah. Even as you're talking about it, you're referencing physically the heart. I see your hands coming to your heart and coming up and through from the lower through to the heart and back out.
It's a toroidal field. So it works. You can do research on toruses or toroidal fields. The heart does the same thing that the earth does, where it has magnetic poles and it feeds out and around like a big donut.
Yes.
And so we're doing that individually, constantly creating our reality and creating the energy that's around us and what we output and what we input. And then in like the container spaces with having a central altar, we're doing the same thing communally. So we're all, I can show you some video and some photos and stuff, but like, especially this dance that we did on Friday, I told everyone when we started, direct your energy towards the central flame. And I explained how the technology works. And the stage where I'm at is in the back, and it was cool because like this was the first dance where the whole dance, everyone was focused on the central flame.
Oh, that's
Usually I'll have some people,
so
like
wonderful,
focusing on me and dancing or doing their communal dance or whatever, their contact dance. And then you've got a few people around the fire in that like old primal way of gathering around the fire and dancing.
Yes.
But it's usually a select pocket. And this one was really cool because every single person, like their backs were to me the entire time. I didn't have one person staring at me, hands up, praying to the DJ God. And I even had that moment.
Thank you so much.
I even had that moment though, right? Where I was like, hey guys, like I'm here, like I missed it. I've been performing as a DJ for over 15 years and I had an ego moment where I was like, this isn't about me. And then, like getting through that process and then reflecting back and looking at the video and the photos and speaking to people in the community as to what they experienced, like I realized how revolutionary that is. And that's what we need.
Yes.
There's a trend right now in electronic music of putting the DJ in the middle of the dance floor.
Oh yeah.
Which I think is great. Like that's cool because it's more of that theater in the round kind of effect. But I was like, wow, this is revolutionary to like remove the person performing, right? So it actually completely almost eliminates what we just talked about of like sorcery. Like at that point, I'm the conductor. I'm scoring the event instead of like everyone's just like, oh, what's he doing? How's he doing it? I'm kind of providing the soundtrack for their experience.
I had an experience way back in college. I went to college outside LA, and so the Moon Tribe gatherings were happening, an hour or two from where I was, and I went to a couple of them, and I couldn't get into it.
Really?
Because it felt to me, and I wasn't doing the drugs. And so that was one thing that kept me out. But the big thing that kept me out was that it felt to me like I was worshiping a generator. Like the DJ was up front. There were these video images. We were all facing that way. No one was interacting. And I was like, this isn't my God. And you're speaking to exactly what the answer that I feel and that's drawn me in and explains what I felt when you came to Boise, and also what I hold when I hold dances. I don't call myself a DJ. I'm a playlist DJ.
Right.
I make really good playlists.
Right.
They're in the space, but I'm not up front.
Right.
And I get to be on the dance floor, and that's how I facilitate space.
Yeah.
Is by being on the floor, moving with everyone and feeling in the space and seeing where does some energy need to be and so on.
Right.
And that's another solution. I really love what you're doing as someone who gets, like, you're going so much deeper with the music than I go as a playlist DJ.
Right.
And to be able to do it that way around the fire, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and we don't need it, like you just said, like even in your container, when I was in Boise, we didn't have the central altar. It was just a regular ecstatic dance. But as long as, again, the intention is there for the experience to be the focus, for the ceremony, for the dance to be the focus, you still don't get that whole hands up, pray to the DJ God, pray to the generator kind of thing that you're speaking of, because there's a difference in intention from the facilitator. You can feel it.
Yeah.
But you can also feel it when someone comes in. It's like, hey, look at me, look what I can do.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are some people who do beautiful things from that place of look what I can do. And there's still something like a weight on it.
And then you've got, there are aspects to what I'm doing that are performative. Like I always tell people, this isn't a persona. This isn't performative. I mean, you're here in my studio. You see how I live. Like all the herbs, all the aromatics, all the things, the prayers, like the tools are things I use every day. And then there is some aspect of making it performative on stage for the ritual, for the ceremony, for the theatrical aspect of it, right?
Yes.
And there are lots of people who are doing that now, which is cool because we're seeing the entertainment industry as a whole shifting in that direction. You've got performers like Deodova or Snow Raven, right? Or Parangi. We talked about Parangi yesterday. It's like, it is very performative and it is entertainment, but again, the intention is different. It's not, hey, come look at me. It's a prayer. It's ritual theater.
Yeah. let's go together into this meeting with a force larger than us.
Entertainment's not going to change. It's been around since humans, right? Like, we all love to be entertained, but what are we being entertained by? What is the intention of it? Why are we producing these things? Is it just to make money and create fame or recognition, or some of the darker aspects I've talked about on other podcasts, where you get into red magic and manipulative magic in the entertainment industry, where it's a genuine harvesting and manipulating of energy? Or is it to come together in communal prayer and celebration, even if it's just celebration of aesthetics and art? There's nothing wrong with that, right? We don't have to be in this deep intention or prayer. We could just be doing it for the joy and the beauty of art.
Right.
But that is still so much different than...
It's something I really wanted to get into with you. Is we talked a little bit yesterday, just in preparing for this, about this place of healing and joy. And this relationship. The way it often strikes me is that sometimes when people are like delving into their trauma, and somatics has become this, it's become known for trauma work.
Right.
And a lot of the generations that have gotten us to now, somatic work's been going on for over 100, for a long, forever, right?
Right.
Engagement with the body. It's not necessarily about our trauma. And I think there's this place where we can go beyond this trauma catch, where it's like, let's dig up all the things that are down there.
It becomes hyper-focused on that, right?
Yeah.
And you've seen that in the New Age movement, in spiritual communities and all these things, is like this focus on trauma. And if you've noticed, as those movements have grown bigger through social media and through all these different circles in the communities, there's an overarching, like, well, I would say an underlying, it's not overarching, like on the whole, it's very positive, but there's always kind of this underlying current of like dysfunction and distortion. And you see it come up in a lot of people in those spaces. You see a lot of projection, you see a lot of bypassing. And I think that comes because that focus in those communities has become, especially in the West, like that's where I would say I'm really referring to, right? Like some of the less developed spiritual communities are all kind of coming into it in the West over the last 50 to 100 years, right? But I think because there's been a hyper focus on dysfunction and trauma and distortion, it's drawn a lot of people to it that have dysfunction, distortion, and trauma. And there isn't necessarily a processing or a raising of that consciousness or that vibration or that energy. It's just another place to play it out at. Right. And so I think what you're speaking to here about joy and what we talked to about yesterday, like we have to look at what are the ultimate goals of these things that we're doing, of these circles and these practices and these ceremonies. Like what were they originally intended to do? Yes, bring healing, but we can't focus on the thing that needs to be healed, because what we focus on expands. So if we're focused on trauma, if we're focused on pain, if we're focused on distortion, we're going to grow that. And if we do that in community, we're going to grow that exponentially. And that's going to spread like a disease throughout the community, right?
Yeah.
What is the point of healing is the question to ask. Like why do we want to heal? I'm sick. How do I want to feel?
Yes.
I have a one-on-one container that I do with people, and I only do it once or twice a year. It's a 6-month mentorship, like one-on-one. And the first 4 weeks, the first 4 volumes, there's 12 volumes. It's called the Omega Code. And I go through these 12 volumes with people over 6 months. And the first 4 volumes are all about looking at your life the way it is, right? Document your story as far back as you want. The second week is identifying blockages and issues. So we're still paying attention to the traumas and the problems. We need to. We have to address them, otherwise we're bypassing.
Right.
And then the third week is the alchemy. What do you want? Okay, you don't want this. We've identified that you don't want this. If
very
you
clear.
stay there, you get nowhere.
Right.
You're just chasing your tail. But when you do the alchemy of it, what is the opposite of that thing that I've been experiencing that I don't want to experience? And then you focus on that. And that's what volume 4 is. It's affirmation practices and different things to drive that into the subconscious mind. Law of assumption, like I am this, I have this.
Yeah.
And this is what I want to see, So it's the same thing in these communities and in these spaces and somatics. Like, we don't need to hyper focus on the trauma or the problem. What's the ultimate outcome?
Yeah.
What are we looking for? We're looking for joy. We're looking for peace and ease in our body, love in our hearts, health, peace in our minds, clear paths forward. And you can feel it when we're speaking about it, right? When I'm speaking about the distortion, it's this tense energy.
As what I'm picturing as you're speaking is, let's say I have a blockage here at my solar plexus or something.
Right.
If I focus on my solar plexus, I can sense into it, but in order for it to help it move, I would want to notice what's below it and above it. And as you were speaking about joy, then there's this like
Release.
Up and out. I was imagining, lines of color coming up and out.
Yeah.
And that's movement.
Right.
And sometimes that arises by going straight into the pain and waiting with curiosity, the sitting and being present, and it will move.
Yeah, that's one part of the invocation for the container in my daily prayer, and what I practice. Like, it's just the script is the same no matter the container. I used it for the marriage that I facilitated, I was telling you about.
Yeah.
Like, before they did their vows, my invocation or my energy that I put into their wedding was my daily prayer. And my favorite part of that prayer is we open this day and all days, this moment and all moments, this container and all containers, in loving acceptance, reception, and celebration of all that is exactly as it is. Right? So the first thing is the reception and the acceptance. That's always the most important part, because otherwise we're bypassing. If we're just trying to move it right away or ignore it. So it's acceptance, reception, and celebration. That's important too. We're not just accepting, we're receiving it. Okay, there's a blockage in my solar plexus. I receive that. It's there for a reason. And I celebrate it because I'm alive. And I'm breathing, and I'm dreaming this dream, and I get to have the experience of having a blockage in my solar plexus.
Yes.
And then walking in trust and faith, in spirit, and the inherent harmony in all things, and the grand perfection of all existence. So to demystify that a little bit, right? Like, the inherent harmony is the idea that there is an inherent harmony. It's natural, it's programmed. Everything in existence has some harmonic balance.
Yeah.
Right? So we're trusting in that. Okay, I have a blockage in my solar plexus, and I trust that it's there for a reason. It's leading me to something. It's teaching me something.
Yes.
It doesn't feel good.
Celebration. Yeah.
Right?
Super
Like,
uncomfortable.
I feel like I'm going to vomit.
Right.
But I trust and accept that it's there because I know that it's part of the inherent harmony and the perfection that pervades all things in existence. Everything is always perfect. And the trick is not to move that blockage or to alchemize that blockage or get rid of it. It's to harmonize with it.
Yeah.
To find the reason why it's there. How is it contributing to the harmony? How is it contributing to the perfection? And in that, we shift, right? The blockage doesn't shift. Our relationship to that distorted energy shifts. And then the door opens up, and that's what you're talking about, that release, right?
Yes.
Once you've accepted, received, and celebrated it as being something that's there for your greater good, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you.
Yeah, that's the step out of victim consciousness.
And I learned that by going through heavy metal toxicity and being super sick for 10 years of my life.
Oh, wow.
Waking up every day, like, not suicidal. I didn't want to kill myself, but I didn't want to live anymore because I was so sick. And it didn't end. It just kept going. And at some point, through these shamanic death processes that we go through, we were just talking about this before we started, right?
Yeah.
Like being chill, being relaxed, like having that kickback attitude. You get there by going through the filth so many times. You know, I talked about that on the EP that I released right before I did the tour. If you listen to the opening intro and Dominique's spoken word on there, it's taken from a Sadhguru talk, and we adapted it, we rewrote it and reframed it. And he talks about how the lotus grows from the muck.
Yeah, I remember that.
The stickier, the grosser, the nastier the muck, the more beautiful the flower. But it's in accepting, receiving, and celebrating the muck for its potential to feed the beautiful flower that we are.
There's a piece that you're bringing through in different words that, as I've been studying in a mystery school for 4 years, it's based on heart center meditation.
Yeah.
And so when you're speaking to the any harmony of all things, like that's a quality of the heart center, of that toroidal field, that ability to meet the resonance we have with each other and with all that is. And I think even if, I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Buhner's work, but he has this book that's all about communicating with plants. The first third of the book is explaining the heart center and the way these electromagnetic fields are created and the ability to resonate beyond even just the human.
Right.
And we're certainly meeting each other there. There's experiments and people are doing therapy with horses based on the idea that a horse can tell when you come into heart coherence.
Wow.
Like from across a field, the horse will turn and look.
Wow.
In the tradition that I've studied in, there's this sense that, the magic happens when we're connected through the heart center, and that otherwise, generally, there's not access.
Right.
And that those who find ways to push it through are in black magic, which you're calling sorcery. And so it is possible, for the most part, not as powerful, to the average person unavailable, unless you really want to study how to do black magic, which is not a good idea.
It's harder.
Yeah.
Honestly, like anything, it pushes against the natural flow. It actually goes against the natural harmony of things, right? Because for one person or one entity or one being to benefit so much and the rest of the collective that are actually one cohesive piece, to have it taken from them and given to one person, like the way it throws it out of balance, you're actually moving against the natural flow of things.
Yeah.
And that's one of the inherent pieces of sorcery, is you're actually forcing. David Hawkins wrote a good book called Power versus Force, right? And like sorcery is forcing. Sorcery, there's a natural thing that wants to happen from whatever the great spirit, grand architect, great creator wants to do, whatever that organizing intelligence is, whether you call it God or great spirit or whatever you call it, right?
Totally.
Like there is some organizing intelligence to all of this. We have all seen it. We've all experienced it. And it's got some sort of intention. And usually that intention is for the highest and greatest good and highest and greatest joy of all beings, right? And so when we align with that in an intentional way to help facilitate that, right? The inherent harmony and grand perfection.
The larger being of interbeing.
We surrender our ego to that, and we use our ego, we use our individual consciousness to facilitate that, but we become a servant to the creator, and we're moving that energy forward. It's easy. It's like paddling downstream. Like creator energy is carrying you and you're accelerating what's already happening, right? But sorcery, black magic, whatever, any kind of manipulative anything is pushing against that. So it's like paddling upstream.
Which I feel is what I was taught growing up, that that's what it is to succeed. You got to paddle hard and go upstream, and the world works in this way. That's all competition. You got to make, and it's wild.
Dog eat
to
dog.
me.
Yeah.
It's wild
Which
to me.
is like, I think that is the evolution of our consciousness. And it's funny because it's, there's a term that's thrown around a lot, the ancient future.
Yes.
Right. I use it a lot. I have a project with Arrow. That's the name of the music project. Savage is another performer that's kind of in my genre of music. He talks about it all the time. He uses that term all the time. And we're moving towards this future way of being, but it really is going backwards to what we knew in ancient times and what many cultures still know. Like, again, I'm speaking more for us in the West.
Yes.
Right? Because we're returning to these tribal ways. We're returning to these primal ways where we're interdependent on one another, and we all have our individual offering, but we're interdependent. We're not codependent. We don't need everyone else, and everyone else doesn't need us. We're not counterdependent, where it's like, I got myself, I'm going to do this. And you see a lot of that too nowadays.
Yes, beautifully named.
Interdependence. Right?
Yeah.
So important. And it relates to your principle that we opened the podcast about, right?
Yeah.
That inter part of it.
Yes. In interbeing, we're here to bring the peace. Like, I'm here to bring the peace that is given to me to share.
Yes.
And so to speak up, to sing, to dance, to stand for what I'm here to stand for. But that's not instead of. It's not like everyone needs to be like me.
No.
It's we feed the pool,
That would be
including our ego, right? The
Right.
piece of me, exactly as you spoke to, that has a perspective. And that's part of the whole. And it's so easy, like in our contemporary politics and so on, cancel culture, where it becomes one against the other. And it's like, well, it's not to say it's the middle ground. It's just we need all these voices to find the harmony.
Yeah.
The innate harmony that is in where those voices meet.
Yeah, because that
That part of
interbeing requires interdependence. We are dependent on one another to be a whole.
Yes.
And if one person, it's like clockwork, right? All the cogs are turning together. And if that one person is trying to turn the other way, or they're jammed up,
Yes.
right? Sorcery would be the person trying to turn the other way. They're trying to
Totally.
influence the whole clockwork to turn in their direction, you know. And that's funny because you get that with the villain in the movies, right?
Right,
That's kind of
totally.
that energy. And then so that's the sorcerer that's throwing the whole clockwork off, and then you've got the cogwheel that's stuck, and that's the person that's sick, or has mental issues, or is suffering in any way. And so that's where in our interdependence and in our interbeing, we're responsible to help them. We're not responsible to do it for them, because that would be codependent, right?
Right.
And they're responsible to receive from us. Otherwise, they're being counterdependent. No, I'll turn my cog myself, right?
Yeah.
No. So that's jamming up the whole works. So it's our responsibility to give that person what we can, to pour from our individual cups into their collective cup and help them start turning in harmony with all the rest of us.
Yes.
That's that interbeing, and that's that interdependence. We all function together. And that's, like you said, what you've been taught is no, just turn your cog as hard as you can, either in the opposite direction and throw everybody off, or turn it faster than everybody else so everybody has to keep up with you.
Yes.
That's not how we work.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Not how this thing, this dream we're in, was designed.
It's exhausting.
No, yeah, it's designed for us to work together in harmony with one another and honor our individuality, right? Like, I'm not just the clockwork, I'm not just the watch or the clock. Like, I have an individual piece. I'm an individual cog in this turning, this grand unfolding of time and existence.
Yeah.
And that's something I would really love to see in these spiritual communities and in the New Age movement. Is like, everybody says, starve the ego, feed the soul. I say no. I say feed the ego. Feed it what it needs, and feed it from a good place. Don't feed it in a way that takes from others.
Right.
Know yourself. Know your ego, right? GNO, know yourself. Gnosis.
Yeah.
Know yourself. Know your ego. Know what your ego thrives on. One, so that you can feed it what it needs.
Yeah.
So that it can be the loyal dog that's well fed and trained and sits at your doorstep waiting for your commands. And two, so it doesn't go searching for what it needs to feed on.
Right, in the shadow.
In the
and
shadow.
That's the shadow work, right? Is it? There's so much around shadow that gets treated like it's the bad parts of self, and it's not. It's just the unacknowledged pieces that, like, that ego that might be a dog needs to go out and poop. And if nobody's bringing the dog out to poop, then there's going to be poop everywhere. So
it's going to get messy and stinky. And it's going to cause problems. And, you know, Aubrey Marcus, I saw him talk about this not too long ago. And he said the shadow, everyone thinks the shadow is the nasty part of yourself, the poop, right? That like you don't like, that you don't want to see, that you don't want to acknowledge, but you're aware of it.
Yeah.
And it's not. Like, our shadow is the thing it's out of it's
see
not
it.
in the periphery. It's not over here where I can kind of pick up on it. Okay, it's there. I don't really like it. Push it away or deal with it. It's the shadow. It's in the darkness. You can't see it.
Yeah.
You have to actively seek it and peel back layers and deal with the resistance to seeing that, because the reason it's been put in the shadow everything is the subconscious.
Yes.
Right? In existence. Like, it's something like 93% of our actions are motivated by our subconscious mind,
Yeah.
by our shadow, the
Right.
things we don't see.
Yeah.
7% is like conscious thought.
I think of the body as the unconscious, like all the patterns, the way I'm sitting, and it would be way too much to be aware of it.
Yeah, you're not
If I
supposed
could-
to. Those unconscious patterns keep us safe. The
Yes.
reason our unconscious formed them, and they're erroneous a lot of the time, they're not accurate, they're not actually keeping us safe, but our subconscious has formed something telling us that they're keeping us safe. So when we start to reformat those things, when we go through that process of like, here's where I'm at, here's where I want to be, that bridging that gap, there's a hell of a lot of resistance, because your animal brain thinks that you bridge that gap and you end up here, you're going to die.
Yeah.
It's that dramatic for your subconscious
Yes.
mind. And
That's
so
the
it's-
risk, right?
And it's a big process, you know. Shadow work is not something that we just dive into and knock it out. Okay, we're done. I see
All
it
done.
now. Like, you have to really learn to like self-soothe
Yeah.
and have somatic processes and different things that allow you to release that energy as you bridge that gap.
Which brings us back to trauma from a different angle.
Right.
That when we're oriented toward joy, toward our vision of the Most High for how we contribute, including the dog, including the ego,
Right.
in service, then that gives the strength to be with what comes up when we're moving towards joy, because all those patterns
Yeah.
that we might be stuck in will jump right there in the way. And then there's the meeting them, that being with the uncomfortable, the being with seeing some part of myself, like, oh God, I'm that. And then to love that.
The only way out is through.
Yeah.
Right? I continually share that with people I work with. They loop back around and they're into an old pattern. And they're like, I thought we worked through this in the last volume, you know? And I'm like, we did. And you're back here again to see it, like to experience it again and to watch it and to not be of it, to be in it, but not of it. You know, one of the things you just said is, oh God, I'm that.
Yeah.
That's usually the response, right?
Yes.
The practice is learning to be like, oh God, there's that energy again.
Yes.
Because when we say I'm that, the two most important words you will ever utter your entire life are I am, and whatever you put behind it.
I want to take that in. Can you say that again?
The two most important words
words.
you will ever use in your entire life are I am, and what you put behind it.
Yeah.
Right? So you have an old pattern come up, you know, pick something, whatever it is, some distortion, addiction, right?
Yeah.
Let's pick addiction.
Okay.
So you have an addictive energy in your life that continually comes back around,
Yes.
right? And when it comes back around into your space, you say, oh God, I'm an addict.
Right.
And then you get sober and that energy leaves.
Right.
And then it comes back around again because it's part of your patterning. It's part of your karma. It's part of whatever, right? Like,
Yes.
it's part of your path.
Yes.
And it comes back around again and it says, hey, what do you want to do with me? And you go, I'm an addict.
Yes.
And it's in here, right? And
Versus.
if it goes around and you're sober and it
that
comes back
energy
around
again.
and you say, there's that energy again. And it's influencing me in a way that I'm acting in addictive ways,
Yes.
addictive patterns, addictive habits. I don't like that. That's not how I want to work with this energy. Out it goes. And then if it comes back around again, you just laugh, right? You get to that point where you're like, there's that again.
There's that energy again.
And I see that a lot. You know, I work with people and we clear an energy and then it never goes anywhere. It's just not in your field anymore. And then it comes back around and they're like, oh, I'm doing that thing again. And it's that panic and that I am.
Identification with it.
I am that again. There it is again. What's wrong with me? I'm so terrible. And then you get this downward spiral,
Yeah.
you know, acceptance, reception, and celebration of that energy. Aha. Ooh, there's that juicy addiction energy again. Could have got me. It almost hooked me. No, not this time.
Right.
You know, out it goes. Loving it. That's the alchemy, you know, coming back to what you said earlier about what we talked about yesterday. Love, joy, peace. Like these are all the goals of all of these practices.
And it doesn't mean that everything we experience in holding that is joyful. Right? That's where the confusion
That's
is, right?
the confusion.
And that's where it
Yes.
gets bypassed.
That's the distortion in the New Age circles.
Oh, it's all light, we just have to.
I love rainbows.
Yeah, totally.
No, it's a whole lot of muck.
For me, with ecstatic dance,
Yeah.
at first when I would try to go to ecstatic dance, and I was like a professional dancer studying modern dance and that kind of stuff, I would go to ecstatic dance and I found it unsatisfying because I wanted to do my fancy movement or felt unmet in certain ways. Still happens. And I'm like, oh, so we're supposed to be ecstatic? And it took a while for me to get this was about sitting in that discomfort.
Right.
To meet it, and then something would happen. But I was so in my ego about, well, this has to be super enjoyable all the time, and
Expectation.
So it is funny, this name, ecstatic dance. It's very imposing.
Yeah, it's part of why I've created the container I have. I didn't do dance. I've been DJing in nightclubs, ecstatic dances, festivals everywhere for over 15 years, right? And I've never been a dancer. I'm a musician. I like beats and rhythm, and that's where the focus lies for me. I've never been a dancer. I played my first ecstatic dance having never gone to ecstatic dance.
Oh, wow.
My girlfriend at the time told me I needed to come play, connected me with the organizers. They heard my music. They knew it fit right. They invited me. And it was funny because my friend Johnny in Kauai, he was the organizer of the Kauai ecstatic dance. And I would go play and he'd say, you never dance with us. And I'm like, I don't dance. Like, I'm not a dancer. It's not my thing. And then I remember we were playing, the whole Kauai crew went to Big Island for a show. There's this amazing property, the guy that owns Sun Warrior Protein. He has this crazy property up there. It's got a Stargate and all these infinity pools. And
oh my goodness.
So we're playing this amazing dance out there and I'm jamming my music and Johnny comes running up to me on stage and he's like, you're dancing. And I'm like, yeah? And he's like, you never dance, you're dancing. I'm like, yeah. And it was because I'd found that place with my music, that ecstatic place, that ecstasis, right? If we look at the etymology of the word ecstatic, I found that place where I was lost in the flow of the moment. My music got in me. It's moving my body. I'm not moving my body in a performative way because I studied dance or I want people to recognize me. My body is moving itself to the rhythm that's flowing through my ears and through my body.
Yes.
And still to this day, that's how it is. Like, I don't dance. I don't go out and dance. I'm a lot more chill now. If I'm out at a club or something with my girlfriend, like, we'll dance and get down on the dance floor. It's fun. But like, I'm not a dancer. I don't go to ecstatic dance. And the main reason for that is a lot of the music that's out there doesn't get in my bones. It doesn't move my body.
Yeah, let's talk about the music a bit. Here we've been in this abstract world of the shamanic.
Right.
And it's such a beautiful background. How does that come through you? What is, this voice that's given to you of what you're here to create in your music? And your visual art too, but start with music.
For me, like, art has always been about accessing the flow state, getting mindless, losing my mind, getting out of the monkey mind and just being a human being instead of a human doing.
Yes.
Right? Another Wayne Dyer concept. You are a human being, not a human doing. So many of us are human doings.
Yeah.
What am I doing right now? What am I doing tomorrow? How am I doing it? Like, when do we just take time to be? And I guess the irony in that is it was in doing art that I was able to find my being, right? And so to answer generally as an artist and not as a musician, and we can go deeper into the things like we spoke about yesterday and how I'm doing it, what I'm doing, but like, to answer generally, I am accessing my ability to be through creating art, through doing art.
Yeah.
And find that flow state, that just peaceful state of just being present and here and dreaming awake in this moment.
I feel like you just drew the piece back into some of what the shamanic is. I mean, when I think of
I tend to do that.
what is shamanic training, I
Right.
was given as an artist time, space, and energy. That's choreography. And it's, in choreography 101, that's kind of the standard. Oh, it's time, space, and energy.
I love that.
If that isn't a definition of shamanic awareness, what is time, space, and energy?
And to bring it back again to the earlier conversation, you have shamanism and like genuine esoteric practice, and then you've got manipulation, black magic, and sorcery.
Yes.
So it's time, space, and energy, right? This is taking and using time, space, and energy for your own good.
Yeah.
Shamanism, esoteric practice, whatever different word you want to use to describe aligning with the divine
Yes.
and using time, space, and energy to choreograph the experience you're having and choreograph the experience of others that are interacting with you.
Yes.
I love that. I absolutely love that, because that is what we're doing. We're the choreographer of our life and of our experience. And when we do that in harmony with the thing that created us and that flows through us and that pervades this existence.
I just keep trying to find some way to talk about bass. And I think what I get with bass music that's different from, I grew up with a classical composer for a father. So
Right.
I was in, all of these different kinds of sound and so on.
Right.
There's something about bass music that gets to the root of the body, like the root chakra that gets the hips moving, gets the eros flowing, the life force moving.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's, it's funny because you hear bass music and a lot of that, if you hear that in the mainstream, it's usually dark. There's usually a lot of association with different scenes regarding different substances, and it's heavy and it's like, dubstep and like bass music. So I say I make bass music, but that's not entirely correct. Like, I make music with an emphasis on the bass frequencies.
Yes.
And I use the bass frequencies as tactile energies, right? Physical energies that can impact the body, like we talked about yesterday. Those higher octaves, every frequency is impacting the body and the different elements and the different chakras and the DNA and the codons and all these different things. But the bass is different because we can feel it in that grounded way you're talking about, in those lower chakras.
Yeah.
You feel it in your gut when you're at a concert.
yeah.
And I remember Excision was touring with some kind of like 10,000 watt PK sound system. It was stupid. Like, it was irresponsible. And he was actually having people at the guardrail at the front of the concert, people were vomiting from the bass frequencies affecting their organs because it was putting pressure.
Wow.
So bass frequencies actually put pressure. Like, what you're hearing when you hear bass is the pressure in the room from that sound wave, pressurizing the room, right? And so that's when I look at all of the shamanic work I'm doing, and then I pair that with sound, I think, okay, like, I'm gonna hit all these different chakras. Every key hits a different chakra. Every song has a different intention. I'm being the maestro up there, the conductor, and I'm moving the energy in the space, right? So what is the most effective, visceral, physical way that I can have that effect and people can not just receive it subconsciously, but feel it?
Yeah.
And it's in the bass. It's in that tactile. I mean, if you can put pressure on people's organs to the point where they purge, it's obviously doing something physical in the body.
Right.
So if I pair that with the intention of healing, or I pair that with the intention of shedding and purging, right? Or I pair that with the intention of joy, and I put that on my music, and I strategically use certain frequencies and keys and harmonics that I know hit certain places in the body or in the energetic field.
Yeah.
And I pair that with a vibratory frequency that physically impacts the body and puts pressure on people. I can really move it.
Yeah.
And they can really feel it. So they don't go, oh, well, did I just think that happened? I don't know. They can't bypass it. And like, I felt that bass in my body shaking me to the point where I was uncontrollably moving in certain ways.
Yeah.
And I see it a lot in when I do my sound journeys at the ends of my set, or I just did a sound journey at Clubhouse to close for another DJ.
Uh-huh.
And I have my electronics set up, and then I've got my didge and my drum and chimes and stuff. But I've got a knob. This is a little knob like this, right? And it's just got bass frequencies. It's just got a pure sine wave on it.
Oh, wow.
And I've got all the keys in Ableton, so I can change it to whatever key I want to hit, whatever chakra I want to hit. And I'll just sit there, and there's all this electronic sound bath playing, and I'll just, and you can watch the room, like you can feel the pressure, right? All those other frequencies, people are just chilling, floating away, doing whatever they do in their sound journey. But when I do those bass frequencies, you know, I had Courtney, the girl I'm dating, at the show on Friday. I was bringing it down in the sound journey, and I was sitting there just playing. And you can just, you know, you turn it a quarter turn, you can feel it's like you're compressing the room.
Yeah.
And I go, you want to try it? And she's like, I don't know. And I was like, listen, just pay attention to the energy in the room, push it until you can feel everyone getting a little uncomfortable, right? Because pressure creates diamonds.
Yeah.
But too much pressure will crack it.
Right.
So we always want to push in any ceremonial space. We only push enough to catalyze the reaction, and then we back off.
Yeah.
Right? And so she gets down there and she twists this thing, and you could just see like her body like contracts because you can feel it. And you know, we all do that, the bass face, like when there's just that nasty drum.
Yeah.
Oh, it's called the bass face for a reason, because you feel that in your body.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
It's fun.
That does sound fun.
You know, and that's my thing,
it
is
sounds
like,
a lot
I'm
of fun.
very into demystifying the esoteric. How do we make all this crazy weird stuff that's actually supernatural, not supernatural, but very natural?
Yes.
How do we make it relatable to the normal everyday person who doesn't understand these things and doesn't have forever to study it? So I'm very into demystifying it, but I'm also into like just living life and being a real person. Like through that experience of chopping wood and carrying water, that lesson, like I want to fight and play and dance and make music and eat food. So like how can I bring all this crazy stuff in and like present it in a package that just makes your life better?
Yeah.
Just juicy, just fun, you know?
This is the bridge you talked about a little bit yesterday about the sacred and the profane.
Yes.
The word interdependence applies here, the way it applies between you and me. It applies between the sacred and the profane. That making something being sacred isn't like, oh, this is precious. I mean, it can be precious, but something becomes too precious, it's going to get stolen.
Yeah.
Right?
Or broken,
or broken, or
whatever.
Yeah. We have to have that disintegration as well. And you were talking about like how you've come from playing nightclubs and raves and so on, and now you're holding these ceremonial containers, and there's a stretch there. There's a play where if you brought your music to a nightclub now, and maybe you do.
I do.
Yeah, it's gonna register. It's just.
Yeah, I think this concept is probably like one of the most potent. I'm really glad you remembered to bring it up after our chat yesterday. It's probably a good place to like wrap up and kind of like close everything, actually.
Beautiful.
I ask people, you know, what is the difference between the sacred and the profane? And you get a lot of different answers, but for me, the answer is judgment.
Yeah.
Because if it exists, if it's in this dream, it's in the awareness, it's here for us, that means creator, spirit, whatever you believe in, created it. Creator wouldn't create anything. If you believe that everything has an inherent harmony and a divine perfection, creator wouldn't create anything that wasn't good, that wasn't beneficial in some way.
Yeah.
Right?
Including the sorcerer.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all just one big interplay, and it's an acceptance of all of it, an appreciation of all of it, and a celebration of all of it that makes it special. It's all wood and water.
Yeah.
It's how we chop the wood and carry the water, right? It's not, I actually had a friend, so I was playing a nightclub downtown a couple months ago, and it's a venue that's way more commercial, and my music fits into some of their offerings once in a while. And there's still alcohol. They don't do hard liquor, but there's still beer, like light liquor still served, right?
Okay.
I had a friend that wouldn't come out. Well, my partner doesn't like me coming out because there's going to be alcohol, and I don't. It's a nightclub and profane. You're
Right.
playing this profane space.
Yes.
And I said, I would much rather go to the nightclub that's like well intentioned and like people are there to feel joy.
Yeah.
Like even the people drinking are there to come out, have a good time, play, enjoy the music. This particular event, my manager puts it on once a month. It's amazing. Like it's such a good vibe. Like I've played so many shows, I've been to so many shows, and this particular offering, the vibe is better than any other show I've been to, and it's because of that acceptance, right?
Yeah.
Like yes, some people are drinking, some people are there to meet girls, some people are there to do the nightclub thing.
Yes.
But everyone is there to have a good time, connect with friends, be joyful, play, listen to music, all high vibe stuff,
Yes.
right? I would rather be there than go to the temple or the church, the holy place, the ceremony where there's lies or deception
Right.
or false pretenses.
Yes.
So what's the difference between the sacred and the profane? Judgment and intention.
Yeah.
And I love working those spaces because those crowds are so open. Alcohol in particular is very interesting with what I do because it lowers your field, it lowers your fortified energetic field, and it opens holes in it for energies to come in. Alcohol was originally called alcohol, I believe is the way it was pronounced. And it has to do with spirits. That's why alcohol was originally called spirits.
Yes.
It lets spirits, it lets energies into your field. It drops your walls.
Yes.
So when you're doing what I'm doing, and there's always an agreement, right? Anytime, and that's very important. Because anytime we're doing work in anybody else's space, there has to be an agreement or it's non-consensual.
Right.
So by buying the ticket, by entering the space, they're agreeing to receive whatever I put out.
Yes.
And even then, there's still a deeper agreement. Like they can still hold their space. I don't ever work directly on anyone or at anyone or in their field. I put energy out and it's there for you to pick it up if you choose.
Yes.
Now in the space with alcohol or a nightclub environment, they're way more open. I've noticed crowds are actually almost sometimes more receptive than ecstatic dance crowds.
Fascinating.
So, you know,
Yes.
sacred and the profane. I told you the story about the girl I was dating was an amazing world musician. She'd played in all these temples and beautiful places around the world. And she just criticized me all the time for playing these dance events. She's like, you have this depth and this amazingness of what you do and what you put into your work. Why do you go play these things? And I said, because that's the places that need them.
Yeah.
I can go to any holy place in the world, a temple, an ashram, you know, some magical place in Bali or Tulum or somewhere that's already all blessed up and good energy.
Yeah.
And am I adding anything to it? If the light is at 100% and I bring more light, like, do I increase the brightness? No, but if I go to dark places, if I go to nightclubs or maybe some ecstatic dance containers that are a little questionable, you know, or festivals where maybe not everybody's in good intention, the vibe's a little lower, it's a little bit darker, and I bring the light,
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot deeper work and a lot more effective. I'm adding to the experience and to the light in the world a lot more than if I go to a very bright place and try to add light. One more candle in a room full of candles doesn't do much.
Yeah.
But if I walk into a pitch black room with no windows, with one candle, I can light the entire room. So
Where do people find you?
everything is at www.lightlanguage.codes.
Sweet.
Yeah, and everything is linked there. You can find all my socials, streaming, everything else. That's the simplest way to find me and information about me.
And the new ceremony you're birthing.
The new offering that we just birthed, actually, last Friday, we had our first one. It's called Spectra. So it's a ritual dance container in its simplest. There's information about it all over my social media.
Excellent. Yeah. Brother, it has been so good to sit here and talk to you.
You too, man. Every time we have conversations, I'm just super stoked. Like, we dropped in so deep in Boise, and that was such a blessing at the beginning of my tour. Thank you for coming here. And blessing me with your presence and allowing me to share.
Such a joy.